You are listening to On The Wire, Racing TV's Irish racing podcast.
Well, hello. Let's Talk Racing with Johnny Ward and Brendan Duke, but it is the duo from Let's Talk Racing. It's Joshua and Andrew Blair White. Joshua Stacey and Andrew Blair White is going to add a bit of professionalism, a bit of intellectual nous, and dare I say it, Dukey, a bit of good looks to our struggling podcast.
Well, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I get a lot of compliments out there for my look.
Really, yeah?
Yeah. Gangster chic I'm going for at the moment.
That's all right. How are you keeping, Dukey?
Pretty good, yeah. I was in Leopardstown yesterday. I don't think I've ever. A man said to me, I think there was a smaller crowd here than there was at Christmas when they weren't letting people in, and I think that's spot on. Actually, it was completely bizarre, tumbleweed blowing across the place. But I got a few quid. Golden Spear, and then no less, I got invited out for drinks and dinner with the owner of Golden Spear. So that was quite nice. Mr.
Breslin.
Yes, a magnificent head of hair that man has on him, hasn't he? Film star good looks, in fact, I would say he has.
Did this dinner take place already, or is it in the future?
No, last night. Place in Booterstown. It's a pub. Oh, I'm so bad with names. I've been there about 10 times, but I can't remember. But yeah, very, very nice.
So on today's show, we're going to go through 3 selections each for Cheltenham. We're also going to give our best bet and our worst bet historically at Cheltenham. I had to trawl very, very deep into the ether of my past through a milieu of bad bets for the latter. Joshua, you're probably too young to have had a lot of bad bets at Cheltenham, but how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you very much for having us on. I'm looking forward to the day coming around. I think it's only, it's a week today that it'll be there, and I'll be raring to go. Like you say, I've not had too many bad bets. I've had plenty of bad bets, but I've not had it over a long period of time. I've only been able to have a punt for the last 3 or 4 years. So hopefully we can not put up anything too bad this year.
Yeah, for a man of his age, Andrew, he's quite the polished performer on your podcast.
Yeah, he is, unfortunately. I don't want to boost his ego too much, though. He needs to keep his head in the door. So he's put up a few good bets this year now, but I'm sure between the two of us, hopefully we'll add something. You've given us a big rep there, Johnny, so we need to almost lower expectations off the bat so that we can maybe go above expectations rather than not come up to them.
Well, I love how you edit your podcast and cut out all the crap, which is like it's a really punchy kind of episode, and it basically cuts to the main points, which is exactly what this podcast never is. Much of it is just kind of filling me and Dukey kind of reflecting on the emptiness of our lives, so to speak, and we will get to that shortly. Racing TV is the only place to watch all 28 festival races next week, and we will be giving away 50 quid of free bets every day with Paddy Power by selecting the correct result in a head-to-head match bet on every race every day in Racing TV's It's a Knockout game at Cheltenham. Play at racingtv.com/knockout. Just pick the outcome of each head-to-head right, and you'll win 50 quid of free bets every day. Probably sounds a bit easier than it actually is. Bet responsibly throughout the Cheltenham Festival. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And Dukey, this is the whole thing. Cheltenham, you can be in the third race on day one, and you can already feeling bad about life because everyone else is winning, but for some reason you're not. And then you start kind of going, I want to get in on the feel good vibe here. What's your worst Cheltenham memory so far in terms of a bet?
In terms of a bet, sorry, this was obviously on the running order. I didn't. I know the horse. I know the jockey. I don't know the name of the horse. I know the jockey. I know the owner and the race. So the lads with their young minds will probably be able to remember this. But I backed a horse in the Pertemps. Geez, it could be 10 years ago now. Anyway, ridden by Richard Johnson, trained by Philip Hobbs, and I backed him anti-post after he won one of the qualifiers in Wincanton, and I pressed up again on the day, and he got interfered with by another JP McManus owned horse trained by Noel Meade, and he was interfered with about 4 times coming up the straight, and then he still might have won despite all this, but for being making a mistake at the last, and he finished 4th in the end. He should have won 10 lengths. That's no exaggeration, but he didn't, and that's the saddest thing that's ever happened to me in Cheltenham. I think by the time all the bets were added up, I think I had him for about $4,000. And in the end, I got something back in the place money. But I mean, it was like ash in my mouth. but I can't remember the name of the horse. But the viewers will. They're better.
Thanks for your research on that. You've really put a lot of effort
Well,
in here. Andrew, what's your worst? We'll get to the best after.
Yeah, well, I think Dukey's one might be if in doubt.
What a man! What the young brains on show here. The spot on.
I don't know how you got that. I was still in nappies when that was running.
Yeah, no, I do somehow remember that horse. I think I backed it as well. Couldn't believe it got beat. I suppose the horse that everyone seemed to love and I just could never get right at Cheltenham was Apple's Jade. She absolutely killed me the year she won the Mayor's Hurdle. I was all over Vroom Vroom Mag. I thought she was an absolute shoe-in. Paul Townend's there looking under his shoulder, turning in, and then still gets beat. And then I'm all over Apple's Jade the next year in the Mayor's Hurdle, and she gets beaten by Benny DeJew. So she just had me on absolute strings, Johnny, throughout the entirety of her career. Anytime I pressed the button, she'd lose. Anytime I'd take her on, she'd go and beat me. So unfortunately, me and Apple's Jade did not have a good reputation together.
Not long ago, I'm thinking of Quevega. Not long ago, Apple's Jade actually gave birth to a foal that is owned by Bective Stud, Noel and Valerie Moore, and you might be hearing about a little bit down the line. Josh Stacey, your turn for the worst.
Yeah, well, the thing is I'm not sure where you've got me on this podcast because my worst two bets at the Cheltenham Festival have both been my naps the last 2 years. 2 years ago, it was Column of Fire in the Martin Pipe who came down at the last, and I thought he was going to bolt up that day. I was really gutted. I was running all the way down to the last fence like an absolute nutter, cheering it on. And when he fell, I fell as well. It was not good. And then last year, my nap of the week was Antucas in the Grand Daniel. And he was beaten a whisker by Sky Pirate. So not a great record. A good record of picking horses at double figure prices that then come down into single figure and finish second or fall. But not a great record at picking winners.
Well, if you spend a little bit longer at this game, you can definitely improve on your stories of really bad bets at Cheltenham Festival. You can have much, much worse stories than that, which actually isn't too bad at all.
Yeah, well, hopefully I can. And if this can be third time lucky and the nap for this year wins, then I'll be a very happy man.
Well, okay, my worst, there's a lot of here I could go for, like laying Coney Green running, thinking he was going too hard. Campiador falling at the last. I'd probably give that in the Fred Winter. I had him for so much money. I'm not saying he definitely would have won, but it was just I was having a really bad Cheltenham, and I was actually watching in the bookies in Dublin. And I never really lose my cool when I'm having a bad day, but I just couldn't believe it, and I literally just kicked the bin in front of me, in front of all these startled punters. So that'd be my worst. My best one, Dukey, would be Sublimity at 60s winning the Champion Hurdle. That was lovely. Unfortunately, I only had a tenner on him, but coming on to you.
Oh, my best one ever is Paisley Park, when that glorious season when he went from winning a handicap in Aintree to crowning his campaign with a thrilling victory in the Stayers Hurdle, and I had backed him at 25-1 for the Stayers Hurdle before he won in Ascot. I backed him at 25-1 for the Stayers Hurdle. And he delivered. So that was a beautiful thing. I had a docket improving by the week for about 4 months, and the horse delivered. And of course, he's pure box office the way he runs. Well, actually, he's become even more box office because now he doesn't even jump off the start and still win. So there could be a postscript to the glorious Paisley Park story.
Could yet go off favourite in the Stayers Hurdle. Who knows? Andrew, I actually backed Ireland -6.5 last year. That must go down as one of the greatest bets I've ever had. Just come into my head there. The spread's a bit bigger this year. Josh is having a knowing patriotic laughter. Maybe we'll get actually hammered yet. But what's your best, Andrew?
Probably for me, the first year Album Photo won the Gold Cup. I backed him after the quite infamous Novice chase in Punchestown, where Paul Townend skewed off with Finian's Oscar in the van as well. On the way down to the last fence, he was still 33-1 at the time. He obviously had the weird prep, just went to Tremor, and he himself he's not an easy watch, Album Photo, because he clambers over fences. And I remember him swinging in, coming to 2 out, and then he took 2 out by the roots. He'd do anything to try and put you on the deck. But he went and won, and at 33-1, that was by far my best. I'd kept backing him throughout the year, and he was still 12-1 on the day as well. So he was by far my most profitable and my most enjoyable winner.
Josh.
I've not had too many massive wins. Milan Native was a good one in the Kim Muir a couple of years ago. But the one that I did really fancy, on my first actual visit to Cheltenham for the festival anyway, was the year that Defi de Soy won the Triumph Hurdle and Arctic Fire won the County. And as far as biggest price winners are concerned, I think Arctic Fire, I think he was 25 to 1 for that. Would have been one of the biggest.
Okay, this is where this show becomes quite beautiful, because we can show some video footage, and we're going to start now with the first selection that Josh has. So basically, we've had 3 selections each, or 3 bets at the Cheltenham Festival. We have had a little bit of crossover. I think it might be just me and Andrew who've had crossover in the Fred Winter, a race that I've already mentioned it's actually a race I really love. I backed the first winner of the Fred Winter. If any of you can remember that, kudos straight away. Trained by Paul Nolan, ridden by modern-day dancer Nina Carberry. But anyway, this is just turned into a bit of a kind of a me getting the trumpet out in terms of bets I had like 14 years ago. We'll start with you, Josh. Buddy Rich is your first selection.
Yeah, I'm actually going to make him my nap of Cheltenham.
Here we go.
I put him up at 20 to 1 on the podcast, and he's now 7s. And the juice
this is him running at Fairyhouse last time out very shortly, when he finished a very honourable 4th.
Yeah, I'm not sure this run is too much to take from it. The winner was Dunvegan. He finished second to Chacun Pour Soi at the Dublin Racing Festival. Grange Walk finished second. He's won since. He was also second at the Dublin Racing Festival behind A Wave of the Sea. And then he was a distant second behind Gentleman de Me. So it wasn't so much this run. It was obviously a decent run, and the form has stacked up slightly. But it was the moment he was entered in the 2-mile novice chase at Cheltenham in October, I had my suspicions that Gordon Elliott might be thinking about the Grand Daniel in the spring. He was a novice. He was fairly unexposed. And I'm hoping, well, he's since been put away from this. I'm hoping that this has been the plan all year. I have a slight worry that if he got into a battle, he might not come up the hill the quicker than the rest. And I would slightly question his attitude, but I'm hoping that he'll travel the best into the race and Davey can get the job done. So 7 to 1, although the price might be skinny now compared to what it was, I still think he goes there with a very good chance. And the fact that Brave Siaska for Venetia Williams is now going to run in the Arkle, I think makes that job a lot easier as well.
Do you get the feeling as well that like Gordon is a kind of a man on a mission after the year he had in 2021 in general with his horses?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd also say that this year, unfortunately, he doesn't have the Cheveley Park horses anymore. So the ammunition to fire at the Grade 1s is probably not there. 3 Stripe Life and Mighty Potter have their chances, but whether like him, Ginto, they're all in and around 7, 8 to 1 chances for their respective races. So maybe Grade 1 winners might come thin, whether he's going to be firing plenty at the handicaps. And you can already look at his entries. He's got 3 or 4 in virtually every one. I think he's only got 2 in the Grand Daniel, and that would be Buddy Rich would be 1, and then Andy Dufresne if he ran. And he probably will. Maybe they might claim off him as well. But I just think Buddy Rich goes there. 144 I was pretty happy with as well. And I think he'll take a good bit of beating if it doesn't turn into a battle.
Andrew, over to you. Your first selection is running in the Fred Winter.
He is, and it was great that you mentioned Jabaroon there, who obviously won the Fred Winter for Paul Nolan many years ago. I quite like HMSC horse in this race. Look, there's any amount of horses that could be well handicapped. If you listen to the betting ring in Ireland, you'd think this Gaelic Warrior should be running off around 155 rather than 129. Yes. The way some people are talking about him, but it wouldn't be for me. Look, he's 5 to 2, no juice in that price.
Tell us about this win last time and why you liked it, when he's beaten a subsequent winner, Gavin Cromwell's, who came up sides at the last.
Yeah, exactly. Global Export in second, who franked the form quite nicely at Navan. He's still a work in progress as a horse. He just seems to be improving time and time again. He was third to Pied Piper and Vauban, second to the Tide Turns, and then he's won this race. And he's got right in deep to the last, as you can see there on your screen, and he's still pulled out and won work in progress. A mark of 128 isn't over facing the horse whatsoever. And I think the likelihood of a strong gallop, a bit of better ground as well, given his breeding, might suit this horse as well. I think he's got a cracking chance. And Paul Nolan, he's going to bring over, I think, 3 runners to the festival, but there'll be a select 3, and all 3 of them could run well, including this lad.
We'll actually watch that again in due course because he is one of my selections. But Juki, this Gaelic Warrior, it's a really anomalous kind of profile, this horse. He's coming from France. He's been given what could be a mark that's actually on the lenient side for a Willie Mullins horse. Not to mind a lenient mark for a Willie Mullins horse who's making his British debut. What are you hearing, given your exploits with 3 other people at the track at Leverstown on Monday?
Well, no, I don't think you need to hear anything. You couldn't say fairer than Joe Chambers coming on Nick Luck's show and saying, "Yeah, we looked at this horse. We're thinking we might put him away for a year," which is kind of a thing Willie Mullins does. He doesn't really run 4-year-olds. So I don't know if he just sticks them out in the field for a year. So we looked at this. We said, "Yeah, well, if he gets this mark, that there's no way he's ever going to get this mark. They couldn't make that mistake. We'll stick him away till he's a 5-year-old, and he'll be a legitimate supreme hurdle contender." Lo and behold, they get a mark lower than they were expecting. And
is this like Cheltenham saying to the French, "We want you, we want you back at Cheltenham. Come back. We want the days of Barracuda," and so on and so forth?
I don't really know what's happened here. I mean, they're in a dangerous place this hard. But the thing about it is, though, I'm reminded a little bit of, because everything has its price. How short can he be? I remember. Well, I can remember very little, but Andrew will remember this. He seems to have a great memory. Remember that Dowalan ran in this about 10 years ago, and Anthony Bromley was all over him on the preview circuit saying, or I think he was off low 130s or something. And Anthony Bromley said, "There, this is a better than meeting. This is definitely a really well handicapped horse." And he was rated 150 the same time the following year, but he finished 13th or something in the race. So I mean, it's a really stiff assignment for a horse, no matter how well he I mean, the old track in Cheltenham I mean, it's a bit of a dog track, really, and or the old course, should I say, it's a bit of a dog track. 22 horses going around there. There's going to be a lot going on. He's only had 3 runs. How short could he be, even if he is thrown in? But it'd be interesting to see. I've seen people telling me he's going to go off 6-4. I suppose it's not impossible, particularly if Willie gets on a roll.
And if it's a horse like that, Andrew, as well, that say if it's kind of like when you back Princess Zoe and Navan that time of 65 or whatever she was running off. It's like you were mentioning the horses that kind of you just can't get right. When you have a horse so right, but the day is somehow so wrong, I find that very, very frustrating to do if there's a punter.
Yeah, exactly. And look, even in more recent times, in last year's race, I think a lot of people said Hugh Gree was a very well handicapped horse of 129, ran an okay race in 4th, probably a much better horse than that. Riviere de Tel got beaten, 7-8 lengths off 134, and she's now a mid 150s rated chaser. So Juki's point is completely valid in terms of you can still have a very well handicapped horse, and yet they won't win this race. And to be honest, I won't be losing any sleep if this horse wins a 5-2.
We will get back to that race in due course, well, because as I said, I have a selection in it. But Juki, it is your selection now, and Brandy Love, who looked very well named the last year with her horrific round of jumping, and you are expecting that she'll be sober and she'll put it all right in the Mayor's Novice.
Yes, well, anyone who backed her, look away now. Look away! Quite a substantial wager on her in this race, and I mean, she still somehow had a chance at this stage, but I mean, she's given away so much ground.
If you put this race on Strava, which is obviously the equivalent for cyclists and runners, and that she's actually lost 178 lengths here with her jumping.
Right, yeah. It was a really tough watch, but what an engine she has. I mean, the winner of that race, Allegory de Bassi, she's a fair mare, and we know that Brandy Love is a really good jumper. She jumped brilliant on the hurdling debut in Naas. Well, except for the hurdle she nearly fell at, but I wouldn't mind that. Basically, she jumped brilliant in Naas going left-handed. She just can't go right. She's a massive engine. She likes to travel on the pace. This track should suit her down to the ground. And I'll be very surprised if she's beaten.
From Brandy to Bailey, Josh, Kim Bailey is saying today that he wants 5 days at Cheltenham Festival. The Mayor's Novice is obviously one of the newer races at the festival. Are you a fan of all these new races? You are a young kid who kind of doesn't probably remember the 3-day festival as much as we do.
Yeah, no, I actually wasn't into horse racing when there was a 3-day festival around. That's how young I am. That might make you feel a bit old. But it wouldn't be for me. The competition is already diluted enough, and adding another day, adding another couple of races, I see the angle of, well, if you take a race off each day, it becomes 6 and you only have to add 2 and it's not too much. But I would much rather, if you're going to do any or make any changes to the festival, simply just move it a day up and start the racing on the Wednesday and finish it on the Saturday, if you're so desperate to get crowds in on Saturday. But 5 days doesn't do it for me, because could you imagine how many horses would be trying to divert to, say, a Ryanair hurdle over 2.5 miles this year if there was one around? I'd imagine half the field would be doing that. So no, it wouldn't be for me, and I really hope that they don't, but I just feel it's inevitable.
Wisdom beyond his years. Let's look back on that HMSC horse run again the last year when he won at Fairyhouse, because he is my first selection of 3. He's obviously 12-1 in the Boodles. As Andrew says, this 12-1 price reflects the fact that you've a very hot favourite in the race. I wouldn't have a big issue having a saver on Gaelic Warrior just in case, but this horse is so solid. And what I like, Andrew, as well, just bring you back in, he was sent off even money in a mile race for Aidan O'Brien, the handicap. So they thought he obviously had enough toe to win over a mile. Better ground. I actually think he can jump better as well, a lot better. I don't think he'd even jump that well at Fairyhouse. And what's not to like, Andrew?
Yeah, there's an awful lot to like. I thought he actually jumped an awful lot better in his first 2 starts. He was a little bit scruffy at times, especially when he hit the front the last day. But I'd say he'd be smuggled into the Boodles, as you say. I think it'll be decent enough ground come to Tuesday. There doesn't seem to be that much forecast rain around, and he was a good horse. He was a late 80s horse on the flat, so he's got a bit of quality about him, this horse, and I think it's a shrewd enough purchase. You see an awful lot of horses go for big money. I think they picked this horse up for around 22 grand at the horses in training sales, which looks a very sharp purchase at this stage because they'll get a lot of wins out of him.
Back to you now, Josh. It was one of these markets that I kind of ignored was the Mayor's Chase, and Concertista, who's your second selection, she's gone out to 4-1 because the last I looked, she was fairly strong favourite for the Mayor's Chase, and the money seems to have come for Ellie May, who I backed in the race last year. I love Mark Walsh. I thought it was one of his poorer rides. I thought he was all over the shop beside obviously the winner. Now we'll see what happens in this race, but Concertista, the one negative maybe you could say about her is that she goes there with a relative lack of experience for the race at hand.
Yeah, that is the one thing. People are crabbed to jumping. She is low, but she's not really threatened to fall yet. On hurdles, I think that she'd beat Ellie May and Mount Ida fairly comfortably over 2.5 miles, and I just hope that she can transition that to fences. At 4-1, I think she becomes a bet. At 5-2, she was skinny enough. And I'm not really too sure why she has drifted out, but I can understand the support for Ellie May, given her close second in the race last year. And Cool Reevy didn't do that form much harm when winning at Punchestown, beating Monkfish and Envoi Allen. I just think that she's probably got more ability than the market's giving her credit for. I don't really understand why with William Hill, she's the 3, or she's outsider of the 3 of the top 3 in the race. And she's low at fences. I'm hoping that's more economical rather than sloppy, and if she can put in an adequate round of jumping, I think she'll have too much natural raw ability for the other 2.
She absolutely comes alive at Cheltenham as well. And I've mentioned this a couple of times. I had Epiton for absolute fortunes. I did one of these mad bets where I got a tip for some JP yoke that was running in like Stratford or something the day at Cheltenham, and I put 4 or 5 horses into an Acume, and they all won, and it was all going down to Epiton in the Mayor's Novice. And obviously she flopped, but Concertista, who finished second, she's like 66s, she's been bolts up in the race the following year, and she's by Nathaniel. So the victories, particularly the victory at Limerick, she'll be much better on this better ground.
Yeah, I hope so as well. And I was quite encouraged that the last day was over 2 miles and 6 as well. I maybe had slight doubts about her staying ability, especially finishing second to Black Tears in the Mayor's Hurdle last year. But she kind of put that to bed there. So I do hope that they go hard, and I think she'll be staying to the line. And I think she's got too much toe for these as well. Like the likes of Mount Ida, I think they'd almost be better up in trip. And I think she does have question marks as well. I know that
if Mount Ida wins, I give up. Honestly, the way she jumped last year, if she gives, this is a good race.
Exactly. I put up Mount Ida last year in the Kimura, and I was very happy. But after 2 or 3 flights, I would have given you anything to cash out every single one of the bets. She wasn't going, and I couldn't believe she won. And I'm just not sure she's going to be quick enough to deal with the likes of Ellie May and Concertista.
Back to ABW and Smoke and Gun, very well named horse, and this horse will be very well fancied as well. This is obviously the 8th one for the Kimura, but this is the horse finishing very honourable 3rd last time out at Fairyhouse, Andrew.
Yeah, it was a good run in a good race as well. Full-time scorer, ends up winning it. He's a good horse for Debrama. And Discorama was in second, who's going to go back to the National for the Nolans. Discordanly's weakening out of your shot as you see it now as well. He won the big handicap at Leopardstown on Sunday. I just like the way he's being campaigned. He won at Porterstown earlier this year. He stays very well. He's running the Thyestes. He was never put in the race, and I don't think that was maybe the day they had him on. So he ran much better this time round. He goes there in decent nick. He's only been given £2 for the English handicapper as well. So he's off 140, and Jamie Codd's going to be booked for him. And I know there's an awful lot of talk about Rob James and his £7, and he'll be very, very good on frontal assault, and he's a very good rider, Rob James. But when it comes to Cheltenham experience, if you wanted one in your corner between Codd and Rob James, I'd pick Jamie Codd all day, every day, and fingers crossed he can smuggle Smoke and Gun into this race and get him home in front.
Back to you, Juki. Now, Bob Ollinger. Here's a theory, lads. I think Bob Ollinger is not going to be. I think there's more of a chance of Bob Ollinger not taking on his main market rival, Galopin Des Champs, than seems apparent at the moment. There's no logic to me whatsoever for Galopin Des Champs running this race. It's like being offered a loaf of bread for 20p in one shop and being offered it for 80p in the next and getting it in the 80p. It doesn't make any sense because he wins the 3 mile race if he goes there. Juki, you're possibly anticipating that by putting up Bob Ollinger as your second selection.
Yeah, well, the news reaches us. I don't know whether Venetia Williams has a hotline to Willie Mullins, but Josh was saying before the show that Longshot is off to the 3 mile race. So wow. that would suggest that they think that Willie is going to be a man of his word and run Galopin Des Champs here. Now, we should say at this juncture, Johnny, that we certainly can't rule out the possibility that Willie Mullins knows more about horses than I do. But what the hell is he? What is he looking at here? The horse, Townham was only able to just about pull him up before he ran onto the M50 at Christmas. He was so strong. He was so strong from the back of the last at the Dublin Racing Festival. He'd take all the beating in the 3 mile race, albeit it's a very hot race with Brave Man's Game and a hoist in York. But so why on earth would you take on Bob Ollinger, who, I put it to you, Johnny Ward, it is not an outrageous statement to say, may have, in terms of just raw pace, may be the fastest horse in national hunt racing.
Well, this is the thing about Strava as well, because Strava does a top speed for you if you run or you cycle. It gives you the top speed at any time you race. So Strava needs to be brought into racing because it's a very good point. What paces are these horses able to go at their top speed? And I was talking to actually Rachel Blackmore about this horse yesterday, and she doesn't get it. I mean, this is a kind of I was talking and he doesn't get excited. It's a real Cheltenham preview night comment, but she was absolutely buzzing talking about this horse. She's got the same from Davy Roach, and he has this awe factor, Juki.
Yeah, I mean, it was a stunning performance last year when he just rolls up to a Brave Man's Game, doing a half speed, and I mean, all right, his round of jumping and Gorn. I mean, it wasn't bad. It was his debut over fences, but it was a little bit careful. But he jumped much better in Punchestown up against a right good horse a horse I think is a right good horse in terms of Capodanno, and I just think he'll make absolute bits of Galopin Des Champs at this trip.
I love it. Absolutely love it. This is the stuff we want on this podcast. ABW, I don't see the logic of this whatsoever. Can you illuminate me as to Willie Mullins' deep thinking on this matter?
No, I've no idea. It just seems to be that Ruby Walsh banged the drum for enough weeks on the Road to Cheltenham show that Willie's almost started listening to him. I don't see it myself. I've been kind of under the illusion over the last couple of weeks that Willie's just kind of pulling the wool over our eyes, really.
Agree.
And is he not just going to run him in the 3 mile race? And it was as if he was just stirring the pot for stirring the pot's sake. But I just don't understand why you'd take on Bob when, personally speaking, I think he'd walk the 3 mile race. I wouldn't be concerned about Brave Man's Game one bit around Cheltenham over 3. So I don't see the logic. It would be great for the neutral, obviously, if the two ran against each other. But I think the two of them will still end up being one in one race, one in the other.
Okay, Josh, if you're going to chime in with us on this, that means that either Willie Mullins is wrong or the four of us are wrong, basically.
I think you're all spot on, and it's music to my ears. I've backed Galopin Des Champs for the 3 mile race at 25-1, and I'm frankly disgusted that he's going for the 2.5 mile race.
If you could give a message to Willie Mullins and Connections right now, would it be like, well
I've tried to every single week on the podcast. I've been begging Willie. I know he's a big watcher of it. He definitely spends his Thursday nights watching our podcast, and I've been hoping that he'd listen, but clearly hasn't. I don't understand. I think he'd win the 3 mile race comfortably. And if I'm honest, he'd be a lay of mine in the Turners. I just think Bob will have too much pace for him.
Yep.
And the way that he dispatched Brave Man's Game and Gaillard de Menil last year in the Ballymore, I think he's the only horse that if he was still hurdling, could really put it up to Honeysuckle and potentially go off favourite in a champion hurdle. I don't know. I just think he's in a different league. And the thing about Galopin de Champs is he's got to be ridden almost in a similar way to Allaho, you suspect, from the front, not miss a beat, jump really well. And at Leopardstown the last day, he was slightly guessy at a few and very brave. And I'm not sure he'd be able to get away with that. I know people have crabbed Bob Ollinger's jumping, but I went back and watched that race at Punchestown, and I don't think he jumped one poorly. So I think his jumping, people are making a meal of it. And I hope he gets the job done. And you know, I'm on at 25s for the Brown Advisory. If Galopin de Champs was to go here, I want Bob Ollinger to pump him.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. And by the way, what absolute contradictory nonsense from us. Like, we want Cheltenham to be like the clashes of great horses. We want the best. Will you run them in the wrong race? Take on the easier race. Like,
No, I do want this race to happen, Johnny, because we could be wrong. It'd be great to see. Like, they're two seriously promising horses, and maybe Galopin de Champs is the next big thing, and he has the speed of a Caudo Star, but could win a Gold Cup. I mean, maybe he is. I want to see this race. And I'm kind of, just the way Willie's talking and the fact that Energumene and Shishkin ran against one another this season, I'm kind of becoming a believer that it will happen, and more power to their elbow if they do it.
Okay,
I think it's interesting as well on the 3-day Cheltenham discussion. Sorry, if we didn't have this 2.5 mile race, we'd more than likely have Brave Man's Game, La Homme Presse, Bob Ollinger, and Galopin de Champs all going up against each other, and that would be serious.
Can anyone give me any reason for a mare's race at all? Like Honeysuckle would be, she could be running in mare's races every year where she owned by other connections. I mean, it's absolute nonsense. That's why she gets her weight allowance. These mares, get rid of the mare's races, get rid of 2 or 3 other races, go back to 3 days, forget about 5. It's not going to happen. What might happen, though, is Vauban winning the Triumph, and this is my second selection, possibly the fastest horse running in Cheltenham. Duke, you mentioned Bob Ollinger. This horse has toe. Now, if you watch this race the last day at Leopardstown, he's actually done a lot wrong at this stage. It was probably a bit of a muddling gallop. Just watch this as he cruises by, despite jumping a little bit right at his hurdles. In behind, you have the likes of the weakening Iker Elen, who ends up absolutely bolting up the next day, and Field Or, who I think is considered better than Pied Piper, is a well-beaten second. And I like this horse. I think 7-4 is actually a very, very fair price in what to me is a 2-horse race. Any objectors to that synopsis, lads?
No objections, but I mean, I think at the prices, I would prefer Pied Piper. I mean, Pied Piper did beat him in Punchestown despite running plenty keen. I know Vauban jumped better in Leopardstown, but Pied Piper settled much better at the trials meeting in Cheltenham. He should be coming forward too. They're obviously 2 serious horses, but I don't really see why Vauban is favoured. I would have them pick him, basically.
Okay, well, it would appear, and this was my inclination before the Spring Juvenile when I fancied Field Or, was that basically Gordon, I'm pretty sure they thought Field Or was better than Pied Piper. I think they sent Pied Piper over to Cheltenham to get a bit of a feel for it. I don't know what you make of it, Josh.
Yeah, I think that was the case, and there was excuses on that first meeting in the maiden hurdle between Vauban. He didn't jump particularly well. He didn't jump the last very well. And still,
to be fair, now Pied Piper was very keen the same day as well, so we'll give him that.
Yeah, and from the vibe from the stable, they both probably left a lot of work to do on both of them. So I think they both have improved from then, and it'd be interesting to see how much they've improved.
Let's stay with the boy Stacey, and now we're looking back on one of my favourite races on the calendar. That is the Troy Town, and this was won by a horse. I think he was 0-8 going into the race, Run Wild Fred. He's not going to be the same price as this. Well, actually, he may be the same price in, obviously, the National Hunt Challenge Cup Amateur. This is a fairly obvious selection, Josh. Why do you like him?
Yeah, it's his only win over fences so far. I just think he's made for this race. Gordon Elliott has made that very clear as well. Rob James looks set to ride, which I do think is interesting with Jamie Codd going on Brayside. I know Rob James is riding Frontal Assault in the Kim Yor for the same owners, so it's maybe not a massive surprise, but he won't get to use his £7 claim. I just feel that he's the most straightforward in the race. I think they know he's going to stay. They know he's going to jump well, and I think Rob James can almost ride him any way he wants to. Whether with Statler, I just have a slight niggling doubt that they're not sure if he's going to really get that massive trip, especially at Cheltenham in a hard run race. And I've just got this vision in my head of Carefully Selected a couple of years ago where Patrick tried to be a bit too clever on him and left Jamie Codd and Ravenshill a million miles out in front. And potentially that could happen again. If it was over 3 miles, I'd 100% back Statler to beat Run Wild Fred. I think he's got more toe than him. I just hope that the hill And a true run race over 3 mile 6 will be right up Run Wild Fred Street. And at 5-2, I know he's vying for favouritism with Statler. I think he's going to go off a bit shorter, and I think he will be fab for the day.
You must think he's better value for the claim, that Mr. James, than the man under you in the photo here, who basically Jamie Codd is he's just better.
But going on to that, would you rather Rob James claiming 7 if you owned Frontal Assault, or would you rather Jamie Codd on board?
It's probably 50-50 at the end of the day. I just think overall with what Codd's done, he gave me a Heartbreak City a few years ago in the National Hunt Chase when he got Lebroy to beat Discorama. I cannot believe how Discorama got beaten that race. And Codd just lifted Lebroy up. And Lebroy hasn't done a dicky bird since then. And your man somehow gets him up. So I think it's probably 6.5 a dozen. It's interesting that Rob James is on Run Wild Fred, but I'd echo what Josh says. I love Run Wild Fred. He would have been the certainty of the meeting last year if he ran in the Kim Euro 140. But unfortunately, I did my money that way last year.
We'll stay with you. You have, I think, the longest price selection of our 11 selections, Bardenstown Lad. Now, this is yet again another Irish trained horse. We don't have any British trained horse. I don't think they win any race actually at the festival. Handicap should be about 28. Bardenstown Lad, John McConnell run the Albert Bartlett, Andrew.
Yeah, I really, really like this horse. He'd be my nap of the whole week. I just love the way he's being campaigned. He's a hardy horse. He ticks every box for this race. He stays 3 miles really well. For his previous run to this was at the October meeting where he won on the old course, which wouldn't have suited him as much as the new course will at Cheltenham. He's a behind the bridle horse, so he's more than likely going to be pumped along coming down the hill. But we've seen that before in the Bartlett. And I'm not saying he's by far probably the flashiest prospect in the race, because there's good horses in there. There's the likes of Manila Crooner, Manila Cocooner, all in there that may be better long-term prospects, but with the likes of Vanillier, Very Wood, Martello Tower, we've had some door stayers win this race, and I think he ticks an awful lot of boxes. He also reminds me, the way he's been going about winning his races, reminds me the way Martin Brazel campaigned City Island the year he won the Ballymore, and he kind of shirked a fair few of the big engagements throughout the season, but kept the horse winning, kept the horse's confidence up, and he's going to go to Cheltenham, a fresh horse, under the radar. And I think actually if Gordon was training him, I think he'd be a single figure price. And that's no disrespect to John McConnell, because I think he's a very good trainer with the horses he has. And I think 14-1's a massive, massive price.
I think there's a slightly lazy general analysis in this race in which people look at the Dublin Racing Festival. They've done so much talk about Cheltenham. They're like, I'm just going to look at that race. That's the key trial here. And look at the 2 horses that finish first and second and say, should they beat Hollow Games? They're going to have big chances. They're very, very short in the betting, but this is a more open race, Andrew.
Yeah, exactly so. And I think people have put that together because of the year Ladies Exhibition won the race. And that was a very odd year in a lot of respects, that Bartlett, because the 4 classy horses did come to the front. It's not always as simple as that.
Yeah.
And I just don't know. As much as the 2 Manila, Cocooner and Crooner are very good horses, they could be very nice long-term prospects. I don't look at them and fear them. I don't fear Manila Crooner, who was outpaced beyond all belief at Leopardstown. His jumping is very, very average. And if I'm being brutally honest, he reminds me of what Fakira was like last year. And he became a horse everyone wanted to back for the Bartlett, and he was just a bit slow. So I think it's just worth a punt on something at a much bigger price that actually hasn't had any of the scars from those races and goes there a fresh horse with good confidence. And that's what Bardenstown Lad is.
Yeah, I like that selection, and spoke to John Allen actually just before we came on, and he did say about Manila Cocooner, he can be a little bit, can get a little bit kind of jiggy the day of the races, so he's just slightly worried about a big crowd for him. Although to be fair, it's early days, and he does jump exceptionally well. It's going to be an interesting race. That Juki, let's get on to the Gold Cup. This is your final selection. This is one of my lays of the meeting actually. This horse, I just don't see why he's favourite. Tell me why I'm wrong.
Well, what have you got running for you in the race?
The 2 horses that he has to reverse form with for a start.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I did make a rather rash statement that. But having said all that, and I have the 4-place lay to show for it. I mean, look, we try to learn that. Having said that, what do Manila Indo fans make of the run in the Irish Gold Cup, when he travelled like a dream and just had to pick up Conflated and couldn't manage it? Is it because he wouldn't go through the pain barrier to get to him? I mean, that you'd have to be anybody who backed him in that race obviously didn't listen to me, so they have some sort of sense, but they must have been on really good terms with themselves for 90% of that race, and desperately disappointed that he only just held on for second. Bearing in mind that Conflated won the race. So I can't have him. I could just about have Protectorate, but I really don't like the prep with him because he's such a keen goer and he's been off for so long. I think he'll pull his race away. You could make a case for Alboom Photo, but I mean, he's hardly going to be any better than he was last year. Galvin, yeah, I mean, you have to respect Galvin. You know he has the stamina. It's a brutal test, the Gold Cup, but I'm not sure he has the class of A Plus Tard. I just basically think that A Plus Tard, whether he's improving or not, I'm not sure I really believe that. I know he's only 7, but he has been around for a long time. But I think if he repeats the run, his performance in last year's Gold Cup, it'll be good enough, basically.
I was struck. Sorry, Juki, yeah.
No, this looks a boat race to me.
Yeah, it's an odd one to think that Galvin could go off favourite for the Gold Cup. I mean, if you said that 12 months ago, it would seem a bit mad. Josh, I did speak to Rachel about A Plus Tard, and she was surprisingly down on the right. She gave this horse at Leopardstown when she probably met a room too early. Horse actually jumped out to his right at times, was quite wide on the track, was the moral winner of the race. But against that, Galvin obviously seems to be showing more pace now, and he's brilliant Cheltenham form.
Yeah, Galvin would be for me as well. I was very surprised, and I've been consistent all year saying that he's not going to win any of these top 3 mile Grade 1s at Leopardstown, but Cheltenham, with the extra 2 furlongs and that stiff finish, would be right up his street. So I was pleasantly surprised when he did win over Christmas, and I just think he fits the profile. I think he'll be staying all day. The harder they go, the more it will suit him. And as long as he jumps well, I think he'll be bang there. And if he's within 2 or 3 lengths at the last or the second last, I think he's going to definitely be finishing the fastest of them all. So be Galvin for me.
Could your old buddy Alboom Photo come back, Andrew?
I think he's got a solid chance of running well. I don't see why he's a bigger price than the likes of Protectorate. I couldn't have Protectorate at all in this race, I must say. I don't like any of the English runners in it, which is a fairly common thread on our 40 minutes so far. But looking at the top in the market, I think Manila Indo, I'd be maybe a little bit more forgiving than Juki on him, just in case he gets into that rhythm out in front. I thought Robbie Power got on very well with him. He can sometimes be a tricky ride, but he does light up around Cheltenham, and he's shown in the last couple of years that he's a good 10 pounds, maybe even a stone better at Cheltenham. So I was optimistic of his run in the Irish Gold Cup, especially after what happened in the King George. So between him and Alboom Photo, they'd probably hold my money. I just think with A Plus Tard, I think he'll run very well. I just think something will beat him. He just seems, when you take the Ryanair run where he should have beaten Min, who was a blatant non-stayer over 2.5 and still won the race. And, the second in the Gold Cup last year, I just wonder whether he's going to be one of these horses that'll be a little bit frustrating and he'll bump into something.
Right, my final selection. This has turned into one of these. I was talking to such a fella or such a one, and she told me this kind of analysis of Cheltenham preview night. Well, he said this, didn't he? Well, anyway, Gordon Elliott said to me at the start of the season, he's forced to follow from the yard was American Mike, who at the time, I'm not even sure he'd actually run for him. This is him winning at a very short price at Navan, but the horse was actually second in this. Went on to finish second, just touched off in a Grade 2 mares race afterwards. Hemlock as well in arrears. I think that's Hemlock in 4th. He has actually run well over hurdles since. The reason I'm putting this horse up is because he's a decent price by consequence of Facile Vega, and I'd say he's an absolute machine. His speed figures seem to be very strong. Briefly, lads, any view on the bumper, Juki?
Yes, I'd be with you, Johnny. It's very hard to be massively against Facile Vega, given the strength and depth that Willie Mullins has. And I mean, that Redemption Day looked a weapon as well. But American Mike, it's a little bit like the Constitution Hill. Horses like him and Constitution Hill, I just love the way they go through the races. They don't waste an ounce of energy. A child could ride them, but they're engaged. You can put them in any position you want in the race. I just absolutely love those horses. They both have plenty to prove, although, as you say, the sectionalistas are all over American Mike to give me a bit of hope. But I just think they're aesthetically very pleasing, the way those two horses go through their races. And slave to aesthetics that I am, Johnny, I will be backing both of them.
Josh, slave to aesthetics yourself. What's your view on it?
American Mike for me. I don't think any horse should be 8 to 11 for any champion bumper, no matter what the field is. And I actually think the Redemption Day and American Mike are seriously good. So the fact that Facile Vega is 8 to 11 might just be hype from his breeding. And he was obviously very impressive at the Dublin Racing Festival. But the run in second of the mare at Dublin Racing Festival was very good. And American Mike beat her very, very comfortably. I think he's a serious horse. And out of those two, I think he'd be one for the Ballymore next year, and Facile Vega might stick to 2. And I like that angle. I think you need a real stayer to win this.
I think that's a good point, Andrew, he makes about horses at prices. Like, I backed horses in the Cheltenham bumper where so much has gone wrong. Even if you back Kilcrew last year, you're wondering, how did he not win the race? He was obviously a shorter price than Sir Gerhard. But what's your take on it?
Yeah, well, I suppose it's the last couple of years. You know, I was all over Appreciated the year he was in it, and he'd won that exact same bumper at the Dublin Racing Festival easily. I couldn't see him get beat. And a stablemate now, obviously, it turned out to be Fernie Hollow, turned up. But that could even easily happen in this race with the likes of Redemption Day, even James's Gate, who looked a real horse at Punchestown a few weeks ago as well. So I think there's enough to take him on at 8 to 11. Look, I think American Mike's got a very good chance. I think before Christmas time, if Facile Vega hadn't run before, if you'd asked plenty of people in Ireland who they thought would be 8 to 11 for the bumper, they'd have said this guy. And he's 5 to 2, which looks a fairly reasonable price. And it looks a little bit like Kilcrew Sir Gerhard last year, where Sir Gerhard kind of ended up drifting off into being the forgotten one of the two and being a backable price. And I'd be with American Mike in this.
Just a couple of things as well. I did get the vibe from Willie Mullins and Patrick when they were talking that they don't seem to suggest that he's miles ahead of everything else at the very least, and mentioned Mercury and obviously Redemption Day. And secondly, obviously the horse he beat the last day in second was a little bit disappointing in the sense that he was beaten under a penalty, subsequently Nace had no excuses, so small knock of the form. Just before we go, I want to mention again, the Race TV is obviously the only place where you can watch all 28 races next week and win 50 quid of free bets every day with Paddy Power by selecting the correct result in the head-to-head match bet. Go to racingtv.com/knockout, and do remember to bet responsibly throughout the week, and that is an order. Just bet responsibly. Even if you're a few points deep and you're 7 races in without a winner, it is a marathon, not a sprint, and Cheltenham can be a meeting where people just lose the run of themselves. It's that type of meeting. You get a bit jiggy, and just do remember to take it easy over the course of the week. Before we go, lads, what wins the Supreme, Juki?
Constitution Hill.
Josh.
So Gerhard if he runs, Constitution Hill if he doesn't.
And Andrew.
Dysart Dynamo.
And I'm actually going, all right, I'm going to go with Kilcrew in this, actually. I think he's a bit of value, and I think if he jumps better and gets a good toe into the race, but again, we'll see. But final word for you, Josh. Give me a prediction of English train winners.
God, well, we've not put up one in the 12 bets we've said today. I would
Bear
be
in
happy.
mind, though, but Britain has the favourite for the first 2 races, so it can't be that bad.
Yeah, but the Irish could easily win the Supreme, and I really don't fancy Edwardstone at all. I think we'll win the Ultima, so we'll probably be 2-1 going into the Champion Hurdle, and then you'll power up the hill. I'd be happy with 9. I think 7.
That's not, I think that's a reasonable shout. And thanks a million to the lads. Lads, have a great week.
Thanks, Johnny. Too.
And
Cheers,
that was the On The Wire Cheltenham special with 3 selections from each of the lads. And do remember to check out the lads' brilliant podcast as well. And we will talk to you soon.
You are listening to On The Wire, Racing TV's Irish racing podcast.